Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun!
The canvas stared back at him, a silent challenge that he couldn't quite meet. Turning away from the easel, Matthew's gaze fell upon a small, ornate box tucked away in the corner of the studio. His heart rate quickened as he approached it, fingers hesitating just above the clasp. This was his secret, the key to unlocking a part of himself that he kept hidden from the world. With a deep breath, he opened the box. Inside lay an assortment of makeup and accessories, lipsticks, eyeshadows, brushes, and a wig of long, flowing brown hair. Matthew's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the items, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through him. He moved to the full-length mirror propped against the wall, studying his reflection. The man staring back at him looked tired, uninspired, but not for long. With practiced movements, Matthew began his transformation. Foundation smoothed over his skin, concealing the day's stubble. Eyeshadow added depth and mystery to his gaze. A swipe of mascara lengthened his lashes, and a touch of blush brought warmth to his cheeks. Finally, he carefully applied a rich, burgundy lipstick, the color bold against his now softened features. The wig came last, cascading over his shoulders in gentle waves. Matthew adjusted it, tucking a few stray strands behind his ear. He blinked, and Alani stared back at him from the mirror. "There you are," Alani whispered, a smile playing at the corners of her painted lips. She smoothed down the front of her loose-fitting artist's smock, mind already racing with ideas for her outfit. The wardrobe in the corner beckoned, filled with carefully curated pieces that allowed Alani to fully express herself. She selected a flowing skirt in shades of purple and teal, pairing it with a crisp white blouse. A delicate silver necklace completed the ensemble. Alani twirled once, watching the skirt billow out around her. Feeling more like herself with each passing moment, Alani returned to the easel. She studied the unfinished painting with fresh eyes, seeing possibilities where before there had only been frustration. With renewed energy, she picked up her brush and began to work. Colors flowed from her brush with an ease that had eluded Matthew earlier. Alani lost herself in the process, time slipping away unnoticed as she brought her vision to life on the canvas. The stiff lines of the cityscape softened, organic shapes weaving through the rigid structures. It was a dance of hard and soft, of masculine and feminine, of the seen and unseen. Hours passed, and as the last rays of sunlight faded from the studio windows, Alani set down her brush. She stepped back, a sense of accomplishment washing over her as she took in the finished piece. "Now that's more like it," she murmured, satisfaction evident in her voice. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. Alani froze, heart pounding. She wasn't expecting anyone, and Matthew certainly hadn't told anyone he'd be working late at the studio.
"Matthew, are you in there? It's Elena from the gallery."
Panic gripped Alani. Elena was the owner of the prestigious art gallery where Matthew's work was displayed. She couldn't see Alani like this. No one could. "Just a moment," Alani called out, pitching her voice lower in an attempt to sound more like Matthew. She scrambled to gather up her wig and makeup, shoving them unceremoniously back into the ornate box. "I have some exciting news about your upcoming show." Elena's voice came through the door again. "Can I come in?" Alani's hands shook as she frantically wiped at her face with a damp cloth, smearing makeup across her cheeks. "Hold on, I'm just cleaning up," she called, desperation creeping into her tone. The door handle began to turn. Alani's eyes widened in horror as she realized she'd forgotten to lock it earlier. There was no time to change clothes or fully remove her makeup. In a split-second decision, she grabbed a large, paint-splattered smock from a nearby hook and threw it on over her outfit, tugging the hood up to shadow her face. The door swung open, and Elena stepped into the studio. She was a striking woman in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. Her sharp eyes took in the dimly lit space, finally landing on the hooded figure by the easel. "Matthew?" Elena asked, a note of confusion in her voice. Alani turned slightly, keeping her face in shadow. "Sorry, Elena," she said, voice gruff. "I'm not feeling well. Thought I might be coming down with something, so I've been keeping covered up." Elena's brow furrowed with concern. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I can come back another time if you'd prefer." No, Alani insisted, curiosity getting the better of her caution. "You said you had news about the show?" Elena's expression brightened. "Yes. I've just gotten off the phone with Janine Carlson. You know, the art critic from the Times? She's heard about your upcoming exhibition and wants to do a feature on you and your work. This could be huge for your career, Matthew." Excitement bubbled up inside Alani, momentarily overshadowing her anxiety about being discovered. "That's incredible news," she said, genuine enthusiasm coloring her words. "It really is," Elena agreed, stepping further into the studio. Her gaze drifted to the newly completed painting on the easel. "Oh my," she breathed, moving closer to examine it. "Matthew, this is extraordinary. There's something different about it. A softness, a vulnerability I haven't seen in your work before." Alani shifted uncomfortably, torn between pride in her work and fear of revealing too much. "I've been experimenting with some new techniques," she offered by way of explanation. Elena nodded, still captivated by the painting. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up. This piece alone could be the centerpiece of your show." She turned back to Alani, a smile playing at her lips. "I always knew you had it in you to push boundaries, Matthew. This is exactly the kind of evolution we've been waiting for." Alani's heart swelled with pride, even as anxiety gnawed at her stomach. She'd achieved the artistic breakthrough she'd been striving for, but at what cost? The constant fear of discovery was exhausting. "Thank you, Elena," she said softly. "That means a lot coming from you." Elena's expression softened. "Are you sure you're all right, Matthew? You seem different somehow." Alani tensed, acutely aware of the makeup still on her face and the feminine clothes hidden beneath the smock. "Just tired," she mumbled. "And, fighting off this bug." Elena didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Well, get some rest. We'll need you in top form for the interview with Janine. I'll email you the details tomorrow." "Sounds good," Alani replied, eager for Elena to leave before her disguise fell apart completely. As if sensing Alani's discomfort, Elena made her way to the door. "Take care of yourself, Matthew. And really fantastic work on that painting. I can't wait to see what else you come up with for the show." With a final wave, Elena departed, closing the door behind her. Alani sagged against the easel, relief washing over her in waves. She'd managed to avoid discovery, but the close call left her shaken. As the adrenaline ebbed, Alani found herself staring at the painting that had so captivated Elena. It was undeniably her best work yet, a perfect fusion of Matthew's technical skill and Alani's unique perspective. For the first time, she'd managed to truly express herself on canvas, bringing forth the duality of her existence in a way that resonated deeply. But at what cost? The constant fear of discovery, the elaborate deceptions required to keep Alani hidden. It was all becoming too much to bear. And now, with the promise of increased scrutiny from the art world looming on the horizon, Alani felt trapped between her desire for artistic recognition and her need to be true to herself. She sank onto a nearby stool, head in her hands. The joy of creating the painting had been replaced by a gnawing anxiety about the future. How long could she continue living this double life? And what would happen if the truth ever came to light? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, Alani's gaze fell upon her reflection in a paint-splattered mirror propped against the wall. Makeup smeared, wig askew. She was a mess. But there was an undeniable light in her eyes, a vibrancy that had been missing from Matthew's reflection earlier that day. Slowly, she stood and approached the mirror. With trembling hands, she removed the wig, letting her natural brown hair fall free. She wiped away the remaining makeup, revealing the features she usually kept hidden beneath Alani's carefully crafted exterior. But as she stared at her reflection, something had changed. The lines between Matthew and Alani seemed to blur, merging into a single, authentic self. In that moment, she realized that she didn't have to choose between the two personas. They were both integral parts of who she was. With this epiphany came a sense of calm determination. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but she knew what she had to do. It was time to stop hiding, to embrace all aspects of herself, both in life and in art. She turned back to the painting, seeing it with new eyes. This piece wasn't just a breakthrough in technique or style. It was a declaration of identity, a visual representation of her journey towards self-acceptance. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the studio windows, Alani made a decision. She would use this opportunity, this increased interest in her work, to finally reveal her true self to the world. It would be terrifying, yes, but also liberating in a way she had only dreamed of before. She picked up a brush, dipping it in a bold, vibrant red. With steady strokes, she signed the painting, not as Matthew, nor as Alani, but with a new name that encompassed both aspects of her identity. Stepping back, she admired her handiwork. The signature gleamed wetly in the early morning light, a promise and a challenge all at once. Whatever came next, she would face it as her complete, authentic self. With a deep breath, she turned away from the easel and began to clean up the studio. There was much to do in the coming days, preparations to make, conversations to have, truths to reveal. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the quiet joy of self-discovery, knowing that her greatest masterpiece was yet to come, the canvas of her own life, painted in the full spectrum of her identity. As she worked, her mind raced with ideas for new pieces, each one a celebration of the journey she had undertaken. She envisioned a series that would chronicle her transformation, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. These wouldn't be mere self-portraits, but rather complex, layered works that invited viewers to question their own preconceptions about identity and self-expression. The sun climbed higher in the sky, filling the studio with warm, golden light. Alani paused in her cleaning to bask in its glow, feeling a sense of renewal wash over her. This was a new day in more ways than one, the beginning of a chapter where she could finally live and create without fear or shame. She thought about the upcoming interview with Janine Carlson, the art critic from the Times. Initially, the prospect had filled her with dread, but now she saw it as an opportunity. What better way to introduce her true self to the world than through her art? She would use the interview to explain the evolution of her work, how embracing all aspects of her identity had unlocked new depths of creativity and expression. Of course, there would be challenges. Not everyone would understand or accept her journey. She thought of her family, her friends, her colleagues in the art world. Some might struggle with the revelation. Others might reject her entirely. The possibility of losing people she cared about weighed heavily on her heart, but she knew that living authentically was worth the risk. As she continued to tidy the studio, Alani's thoughts turned to practical matters. She would need to update her professional materials, artist statements, biography, website, to reflect her true identity. There would be legal considerations as well, name changes and updates to official documents. The task seemed daunting, but also exciting in its finality. Each step would bring her closer to living openly as her complete self. She paused at the wardrobe that housed her collection of feminine clothing. No longer would these pieces be hidden away, only to be worn in secret. She ran her hand over a silk blouse, imagining wearing it to a gallery opening or an interview. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but she was determined to move forward. As the morning wore on, Alani's phone buzzed with a message from Elena. The gallery owner had sent over the details for the interview with Janine Carlson, scheduled for the following week. Alani's heart raced as she read through the information. This was it, the moment that would set her new life in motion. She began to compose a reply, then hesitated. This wasn't a conversation to have over email or text. Elena had been more than just a gallery owner. She'd been a mentor and friend to Matthew over the years. She deserved to hear the truth in person before anyone else. With trembling fingers, Alani dialed Elena's number. As the phone rang, she took deep, calming breaths, reminding herself of the conviction she'd felt earlier that morning. This was the right decision, no matter how difficult it might be. "Matthew?" Elena's voice came through the speaker, warm and familiar. "How are you feeling? Better, I hope?" Alani closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Elena," she said, her voice soft but clear. "There's something important I need to discuss with you. Can we meet in person? Today, if possible." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. When Elena spoke again, her tone was concerned. "Of course, Matthew. Is everything all right? You sound different." "Everything's fine," Alani assured her. "Better than fine, actually. There's just something I need to share with you before the interview next week. Something that will help explain the new direction my work has taken." "Now you've got me intrigued," Elena said, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. "Why don't you come by the gallery this afternoon? We can talk privately in my office." Alani agreed, and they set a time for later that day. As she ended the call, a mix of anxiety and anticipation swirled in her stomach. This was really happening. She was taking the first step towards living openly as her true self. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Alani showered, washing away the last traces of makeup from the night before. As she stood before the mirror, towel wrapped around her body, she studied her reflection. The face looking back at her was neither fully Matthew nor completely Alani, but rather a perfect synthesis of both. She smiled, recognizing herself truly for perhaps the first time. Choosing an outfit for her meeting with Elena proved to be a challenge. She wanted to present herself authentically, but also professionally. After much deliberation, she settled on a pair of tailored black slacks and a flowing blouse in a soft shade of lavender. The outfit struck a balance between masculine and feminine elements, much like the painting that had sparked this journey. As she applied a light touch of makeup, just enough to enhance her features without masking them, Alani rehearsed what she would say to Elena. How could she explain something so personal, so transformative? She hoped that her art would speak for itself, bridging the gap where words might fail. Before leaving the studio, Alani carefully wrapped the painting that had so captivated Elena the night before. She would bring it with her to the gallery, using it as a visual aid to help illustrate her journey. As she secured the canvas, she felt a surge of pride. This piece represented not just an artistic breakthrough, but a personal one as well. The drive to the gallery was nerve-wracking. Alani found herself hyper-aware of every glance from passing drivers or pedestrians. Did they see her differently? Could they tell she was in the midst of a profound personal transformation? She reminded herself to breathe, focusing on the road ahead, both literally and figuratively. Pulling into the parking lot behind the gallery, Alani took a moment to collect herself. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, summoning courage from deep within. With the wrapped painting tucked securely under her arm, Alani made her way to the gallery's entrance. Each step felt momentous, as if she were walking not just into the building, but into a new chapter of her life. The gallery was quiet, being between exhibitions. Alani's footsteps echoed on the polished concrete floor as she made her way towards Elena's office. She paused briefly to look at the space where her upcoming show would be held, imagining the walls adorned with works that truly reflected her complete self. "Matthew?" Elena's voice called out from her office doorway. "Is that you?" Alani turned, heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. She took a deep breath and stepped into view. "Hello, Elena," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice." Elena's eyes widened as she took in Alani's appearance. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. Then, slowly, a look of understanding dawned on Elena's face. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, I see." Alani nodded, grateful for Elena's perceptiveness. "There's a lot I need to explain," she said. "About my art, about myself. May I come in?" Elena stepped aside, gesturing for Alani to enter her office. "Of course," she said, her voice warm and free of judgment. "I have a feeling this is going to be quite the conversation." As Alani crossed the threshold into Elena's office, she felt as though she were stepping not just into a room, but into a new phase of her life. Whatever came next, she would face it as her true, complete self. An artist in every sense of the word, using her life and her work to paint a masterpiece of authenticity and self-expression.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.